Welcome back into Live Now. I'm Austin Westfall, a live look at the skyline over Gaza. The time, Israel Standard Time, 5:41 in the morning. Our analysts and experts cover the latest developments in the Israel-Hamas war, usually every night, at least a few times a week. We'll normally cover updates on the battlefield or the politics surrounding the battlefield. Today, we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to do some news literacy with Dr. Alon Burstein. Alon sent me an article from The Guardian recently. It's titled, Revealed. Israeli military's own data indicates civilian death rate of 83% in Gaza war. We're going to go over it. We're also hopefully going to give some tips and tricks for consuming the news when it relates to complex geopolitical matters. Dr. Alon Burstein is here with me to discuss this. Alon, as always, it's good to see you. This article says that the Israeli military's own data showed 83% of Palestinians killed in Gaza are civilians. My question is, has Israel actually ever published such data? Where is this coming from?
It's good to see you, Austin, as always. So first of all, short answer, no. Israel has never actually made public its own estimates on how many civilians have been killed in the Gaza Strip. Israel has published at times its estimates on the amount of militant operatives, Hamas and non-Hamas, that have been killed in Gaza, although those are also typically left vague. It said usually roughly 23,000, roughly 17,000. So accurate numbers are not available. What this article does, at least just looking at the headline, what it says is it's drawing on data that The Guardian says that it obtained, a leaked IDF document that The Guardian says it had access to, that looks at the names of the Hamas operatives and Palestinian Islamic Jihad operatives that the IDF estimates have been killed in Gaza. So it's looking at that. It's not been made public, so there's no way to actually have access to that data. The Guardian did this with a couple of Israeli NGOs also, and that is really what they're analyzing. It's not official numbers that were made public by Israel or the IDF.
You know, you and I have spoken in the past about the numbers of casualties in the war, about the Palestinian Health Ministry that reports the casualty figures. For viewers who haven't watched our previous segments, how trustworthy are those numbers?
So let me take a step back and talk about what the Guardian is doing in this article. What they did is they took that leaked data set that they said they have from the IDF that says that roughly 8,900 Palestinian Islamic Jihad and Hamas militant operatives have been killed in Gaza as of May of 2025. It said, okay, let's look at that, 8,900 names that Israel says it knows militants have been killed, and then it cross-referenced that with the number of deaths reported by the Palestinian Health Administration in the Gaza Strip, which at that time was about 53,000. That's how they get to that 83%. They said, here is the data from the IDF that says how many militants have been killed. Here is the data from the Palestinian Health Ministry that says how many people have been killed in total. Okay, taking that from that, we get to 83% civilians. So that's in terms of what they did here. So it's not, like I said, it's not really Israeli figures. Israeli figures are only one of those sides. In terms of, so how reliable are the numbers of the Palestinian Health Ministry? This is one of the more controversial aspects of the war. And we've talked about this many times when we've said, okay, how many people have been killed in Gaza? And one of the reasons that it's very, I'll say, confusing to a lot of people is because, first of all, the Palestinian Health Ministry in the Gaza Strip is a ministry of the Hamas government. So it was a ministry when Hamas had a more functioning government in the Gaza Strip. This was one of the ministers. But also because there are two different bodies in Gaza that report casualties. There's the Palestinian Health Ministry, and there's also the Palestinian Communications Ministry. That's the propaganda arm of Hamas. The Palestinian Health Ministry in the Gaza Strip, the numbers that it reports historically have proved to be fairly reliable. If we look at the conflicts that Israel had, the rounds of conflict that Israel had with Gaza in 2009, 2014, even 2021, the numbers that the Palestinian Health Ministry was reporting live at the time, ultimately, when the battle sort of ceased, the numbers that Israel reported ended up being fairly similar, ended up being fairly accurate. So that's one reason why, to large extents, a lot of people who are researching this conflict are saying the numbers that the Palestinian Health Ministry reports are possibly accurate if we look historically. A second reason is that even though, like I said, Israel's never actually said how many civilians or people in general it estimates have been killed in Gaza, whenever Israel has said what it estimates its ratio of militants to civilians that have been killed, usually those numbers end up adding up to some extent to the numbers of the Palestinian Health Ministry. I'll just give you one example before we move on. In the end of May, on May 25th, the IDF did publish a different report, not what the Guardian citing, a different report that says that it estimates that over the past 2 months, so from March until May, 800 militants had been killed in Gaza, and then it estimates that the number of militants to civilians is roughly 1 to 3. So for every militant that's killed, roughly three civilians are killed. Put that together, that means that the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, the Israeli military, is estimating that roughly 3,200 people had been killed in Gaza over those 2 months. The Palestinian Health Ministry at that time was reporting fairly similar numbers. It was reporting 3,500, a couple days later, 3,700. So again, if we look at what Israel does report in terms of the casualties it estimates, and also if we look at history, usually the Palestinian Health Ministry can be relatively trustworthy. But the thing that's very important to remember, they do not distinguish between militants and civilians. They just report how many Palestinians have been killed in Gaza since the war began.
So again, coming to this Guardian article, the headline is Israeli military's own data indicates civilian death rate of 83% in Gaza war. Is there something we can learn from this information alone?
So looking at this article, really the reason that I sent this to you and I was like, let's talk about this, was that the headline is vastly misleading. That doesn't mean that there's nothing to be learned. The headline is misleading because, like I said, the Israeli military's data does not show 83% of civilians have been killed. 80% of those killed in the Gaza Strip are civilians. It simply does not. It says that 8,900 militants have been killed in the Gaza Strip. And the Palestinian Health Ministry says that in turn, 53,000 Palestinians were killed at that time. So those are two different data sets. But if you dig deeper into the article, there is a revealing point that one can learn something about what the Israeli military is estimating that is to some extent equally shocking. If we look at what the Guardian says about that leaked data set of the IDF, it does say how many militants the IDF estimates there are in Gaza in total. It says that within that data set that the Guardian says it got access to, there are names of 47,653 members of the Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad that are fighting operatives at that time. If that's true, if that's what the IDF is estimating, then that's a pretty damning report to say, and as of May this year, so that's 19 months into the war, as of May this year, only 8,900 of them have been killed, because that is what the IDF's data shows. They say again, they are saying that the Israeli military is saying that 8,900 operatives have been killed. They named them, and that the entire data set has 47,000 names of militant operatives. So that's not saying how many civilians have been killed, but it is saying that if those documents are accurate, which again, the IDF has not confirmed that, but if those documents are accurate, then the Israeli military is estimating that it has only managed to kill about 18 or 19% of the fighting operatives in the Gaza Strip as of May of 2025. That unto itself, I would say, is quite damning. So we don't know from this the ratio of civilians that were killed, but we can learn something possibly about how the IDF estimates the war is going up until now.
Live look at Jerusalem, again, early morning hours there in Israel Standard Time. In general alone, what advice do you have for people when they read news about the war? How can people track this war the best they can, the most responsibly they can?
It's very complicated. In general, understanding what's going on battlefields has become very tricky. Israel and Gaza is not the only example of that. Reporters that have covered Russia and Ukraine have said that that was the most impossible conflict to cover. Both sides spreading vast misinformation, everyone relying on reports of basically civilians on the ground. Usually those are very accurate because they're seeing what's happening, but they also have no way to corroborate their data. So first of all, if people are confused, that's okay. It's okay, and that's one of the things that's important to also remember. It's okay and good to be confused and to be questioning. To actually, when you see an article that says Israel has committed this, Hamas has committed that, all of Palestinians support that, all of Israelis support that, first and foremost, have a critical eye. Assume that very often there is no absolute 100% accuracy to someone saying one side is entirely in support of that or entirely does that, or the other side is entirely in support of that. That's usually not the case. So that's the first piece of advice I would give. The second piece of advice, as is very glaring from this article of The Guardian, is make sure you read beyond the headline and try to analyze or at least understand how did the reporters come to their conclusions? Because the headline is meant to catch your eye. And most people, let's face it, don't have time to read articles very in depth. I'm an academic, I study this conflict, and even I can't keep up with all of the news that is constantly bombarded. So you have to end up skimming headlines and then think, what is it that you're going to read? So if you're doing that, that's okay, but just remember, you haven't actually read the story. And if you are reading the story, then don't just rely on what's put in bold or the headlines, but actually try to see, wait a minute, how did they come to this conclusion? And then you can have your own critical eye. Unlike a lot of people, I don't say mistrust the media. I think the media is usually trying to do its job. At the same time, part of its job is to simplify the news. Part of its job is to try to just bring you things as concrete as possible and as succinctly as possible. So remember that there's always a deeper side to it, and that very, very often when things are presented as tight and neat, saying, well, the Israeli government says that, the Israeli military thinks that, Hamas thinks that, it's usually far more complex than that. Just like, and what I always tell people, always think of your own country and your own side. Saying all Americans think something is always going to be wrong, no matter what. Similarly, not all Israelis think something, not all Palestinians think something. Saying, well, the entire U.S. administration or U.S. military believes A, B, and C. We've seen this. I know you're talking to Hal later about Iran. We've seen even the questions about what was destroyed in Iran. The uranium wasn't destroyed, was not destroyed. The U.S. military thinks this, thinks that. The military itself does not have one answer. So similarly, whenever you see something that's packaging things just too neatly, just packaging everything as if it's very, very simple what that side thinks or what is the truth, that's a good time to sort of raise an eyebrow and dig a little deeper, because unfortunately, it's usually not that simple.
That is one of the luxuries we have here at LiveNOW, and one of the reasons why I love having you on. That's also one of the main reasons why Alon and I go 15, 20, 25 minutes plus sometimes. It's because these things take time to discuss. It takes time to tell the stories and give them justice. Alon runs the YouTube channel called the Israel-Palestine Report. He recently underwent a rebranding. You can go give him a subscribe now on YouTube. Hey, Alon, as always, good to see you. We'll check in soon.
Thank you. Have a good night.